All right, everybody up. Let's go. Come on, up the feet. Let's go. Come on, everybody. Get some energy in the room. Yeah, do it like that. Let's do it up high. Come on. Yeah. Right, everybody have a seat. Yes. If you believe that the American dream is alive and well, let me hear you say absolutely. Very loudly, if you're committed to be better than you are now when you get back, say absolutely. And if you believe in the power of Choice Hotels, very loudly, let me hear you say absolutely. You know, I believe that to be successful in life, you have to put everything you have into everything that you do. So I want you to bring the kind of energy to this room right now that you would want to bring if you're having someone go into one of your hotels. If you're willing to do that, say loudly, absolutely. You know, wake-up calls are very important in life, but sometimes we don't pay attention to what they really mean. Like, how many of you use a wake-up call to wake you up this morning in the hotel, perhaps? So let's pretend, for instance, let me ask another question. How many of you in the room have ever had a day when somebody got on your last nerve? There's a lot of people in the room. And so let's say, for instance, you're driving home now in your car, and you turn on your easy listening radio station because you're trying to unwind and relax so you don't kill somebody. So all of a sudden, as you begin to unwind and relax, you notice that, you're daydreaming, your mind drifts off. You're not paying attention to where you're really going. And all of a sudden, you look up, you notice there's a car right in front of you. Uh-oh, bam, you slam on your brakes. Tires screaming. Heart's beating out of your chest. You land just inches from the car in front of you. How many have ever had that relationship, had that happen? Raise your hand. Rest of you liars in the back, get your hands up, right? We've all had that happen. That's a wake-up call to do what? Pay attention. Let's all say it together. 1, 2, 3. Pay attention. Let me ask another question. How many of you in the room have ever had a disagreement with another person? And after a while, it really doesn't matter what the disagreement is about. The point of the argument is to what? It's to win, right? And sometimes we can say things to people, we really don't mean it, and we know that's a wake-up call to change our attitude and our approach. 9/11 was a wake-up call, was it not? Say absolutely. We're going about our daily lives and boom, the unthinkable happens. But I've traveled around as I've seen the resiliency. Resiliency is a word I want you to take out of this room when you leave this afternoon. Let's all say it together, resiliency. 1, 2, 3, resiliency. I've seen the resiliency of the people of our nation since that happened in 9/11. I've traveled north, south, east, and west. And it makes me proud to be an American. How about a hand for the women and the men of our armed services who they work for us right now, protect us while we're sitting in this room. How about a hand for our armed services? Give me a hand. I got the biggest wake-up call of my life a few years ago. The summer of 1997, and my dad wasn't looking very well. I grew up in the hospitality business. My dad had a restaurant and then a nightclub for the last 33 years in St. Louis to this point. And so they say, your dad's not looking good. Well, his face was swelling in his waistline. He liked to eat. So I said, well, he's eating his own cooking. My grandmother, his mother said, no, something's wrong. Go to see a doctor. So he goes to see a doctor, and this doctor diagnoses a hernia. He comes back home, and my grandmother says, nope, you've been my son. I've been looking at your face 61 years. Something's more wrong with you. You better go see my doctor. Now, we all know that grandmothers have their own special doctor, don't they? He goes to see my grandmother's doctor. They admit him into the hospital immediately. Now, I don't know any better. I live in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's an hour flight from Minneapolis to St. Louis. If my dad goes into hernia surgery at noon and my flight leaves at noon, by the time I rent the car, I drive to the hospital, I can see my dad, and everything's going to be okay. But I knew something was wrong when my flight was 3.5 hours late. I get to the hospital, I'm in the waiting room, and I'm waiting 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, sign of no one. All of a sudden, around 7 o'clock, Dr. Kenneth Bennett walks into the room. I leap to my feet. He doesn't ask me. He orders me, sit down. He said, you got to sit down because I need to sit down. Sweat was pouring off of the guy like bullets, soaking wet. He said, inside of your father's stomach, we found a tumor that was the size of a volleyball. In the effort to save his life, we had to take out his stomach, his pancreas, and his spleen. I see some of you nodding, say, you know about that surgery. Because when they do that, they take your small intestines, look for a part of it's pliable, they fuse it to your esophagus, put tubes down you to get you to accept this new distribution method for the feeding of your food. Well, my dad didn't like this. He didn't like the discomfort. He didn't complain much. I never heard him complain much. If he didn't like a situation, boom, he just took action. In his discomfort, he decided to pull out those tubes. And that's where this story really begins. A simple function that you all performed at lunch, he couldn't eat anything. When you can't eat it, you've got a serious problem. They go back in 30 days later to try to fix the problem. It doesn't work. Now we're in real trouble. He's being fed intravenously. Now it's Christmas time. The doctor says, look, we're going to go in and try to fix your dad one more time, but if this doesn't work, I'm telling you, we've got to send him home. I said, and what you're telling me, you're sending him home to die. Look at him. He can't live like this. He said, that's all we can do. Right after Christmas, they operate. Just after the ensuing New Year, the phone rings. Dr. Bennett, if you ever want to see your dad alive, you better get on a plane. You better come now. He's going to die. He's not going to make it. Come now. Well, see, I didn't get to know my dad till I was a grown man. Losing him at that point was a bit more than I could bear, but I got there. Got on that plane, got to my grandmother's house, and as soon as I walked in the door, it was the phone, Dr. Bennett. He says, hey, I got good news for you. The temperature has subsided, but I need you to do me a favor. Just nod your head and say, yeah. I said, yeah, what is it? He said, I need you and your family to stop calling this hospital and stop coming by here for the next couple of days because you're driving me nuts. Because Saturday morning, for the first time in 7 months, we're going to try to get him to eat real food to see if he can save his life. I kept him back. But it was hard, but I woke up that morning just like I did this one about 5:30. I don't even remember the drive to the hospital. All I know, the next thing I know is I'm walking into the lobby of the hospital. Bing! The door opens and I ascend to my father's floor. We've all been there, haven't we? Early in the morning, the antiseptic smell of a hospital. Doctors and nurses ordering their rounds. Case coordinators and insurance people ordering their day. I walk into my dad's room and I look at him. He was sleeping. I look at the clock on the wall that says 6:40, and boom, I had a flashback. How many of you ever had a flashback in your life and you say, God, how did I get here? Can you remember what you were doing your 16th birthday, 17th, 18th? Should I stop there? But somehow we wake up this morning with yet another opportunity to try to make a difference. And as I look at this flashback, I think about all of the kids that grew up in this little area that we call home. Most of the boys never saw their 18th birthday. My oldest brother was murdered when he was 35 years ago. My baby's brother's been in prison now 27 years. See, my mother was 15 when I was born, dad 19, baby raising a baby. So at the age of 11, after dealing with a lot of abuse, I decided to pack my clothes in paper bags and run away from home to live with my grandmother. Now, those of you who know the power of a grandmother's love, you know it's very powerful medicine, is it not? Say absolutely. Now, do we happen to have any grandmothers in the audience this afternoon? Raise your hand if you're a grandmother. I know this is a young audience. We do have some grandmothers. How about a hand for the grandmothers? Give them some love. How about grandfathers? Any grandfathers in the room? Raise your hand if you're a grandfather. Well, give the grandfathers, they need love too. Give them some love. Come on. My grandmother gave me something I want you to take out of this room this afternoon. She gave me a larger vision of my future. She could see things in me that I couldn't see in myself. She said, it doesn't matter what people think or say about you. You can become anything you want to do if you're focused on it, if you're committed to it, and it doesn't violate the rights of others or universal law. She taught me how to dream. So I set my sights on a goal, a journey. I wanted the way out of the ghetto into a better life. So I chose athletics. And quite frankly, I wasn't very good. Now, I don't know about you. There always seemed to be a kid in my neighborhood who was bigger, faster. She was captain of the cheerleading squad. How many of you knew kids that were real popular when you grew up? And how many of you hated those kids? But the one thing I found out about success is this. It doesn't always go to the brightest, the fastest, the strongest, the person with the most money or natural ability. I found out I could bridge the gap of my deficiencies with hard work and a bigger vision. I could show up early. I could stay late. I could outwork the person next to me that had more talent. And fortunately for me, that paid off. So by the time I got ready to go to finish with high school, I was fortunate enough to be recruited for several colleges for football. Chose the University of Minnesota. Yay, go first. I got a golfer here, right? People always ask me, who in the world would live in Minnesota? A guy on a plane not long ago, he said, man, there ain't no black people in Minnesota but Prince and Dave Winfield. That's a joke. You know, you can laugh at that. But, it's funny. People always ask me why I live in Minnesota. Well, anybody here live in Minneapolis? Okay, we have a very low crime for a city of our size, and there's a reason for it. When it's 30 below zero, ain't nobody out there to rob. You got it? All the victims are inside. So I said, okay, next natural rung on the ladder, National Football League. That's my goal, my dream. That's my new journey. How many of you found that you don't always get what you want in life? Raise your hand. I mean, I'm sitting about a draft back in 1978, and the phone never rang. In case many of you have never experienced this, it's called rejection. So I got upset, with that. The guy said, hey, go get a book. I went and got a book by a guy named David Schwartz called The Magic of Thinking Big. He said, listen, since you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big because it takes just as much energy to think small as big. Shoot for the moon, you might land on a star. I took it literally, decided I was going to be an actor, packed up my bags and moved to Hollywood. Man, if I'm looking for rejection, back up the dump truck, right? And I did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it never quite happened for me the way I thought it would. So once again, I find myself at the crossroads of life, the cul-de-sac of decision, having to make another adjustment in life. And I chose business. And I'm glad I chose business because I love business for one reason. I love people. And you know, it's funny, I had a chance to speak at Comdex several years ago, the largest computer convention in the country. I mean, at the closing ceremony, 3,500 people, the power of technology. I look at the program, 33 workshops about the power of technology. Say, wow, there's something wrong with this, though. Not one single workshop was dedicated to the most important part of a business, which is what? It's people. We make the technology to serve who? Say people. 1, 2, 3. After all, people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. You know, it's all about the people. And if we forget about that, we forget about why we do what we do each and every day. Well, I couldn't help but be impressed with you. 6,300 franchises, 500,000 rooms in 35 different countries. Give yourselves a hand. So the question becomes, how do you guarantee your future? You know, I looked at your mission statement. It says, you connect people through the power of hospitality, wherever their journey may lead them. If you look up the definition of hospitality, it's a very powerful word. It says it's a relationship between host and guest through reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, and strangers. But if you go to encyclopedia, it's even more powerful. I looked it up and it just kind of blew my mind. It's a powerful definition. Here's what it says. It says, hospitality are the virtues of a great soul that cares for the whole universe through the ties of humanity. Wow, that's powerful. But how do we take those words off of paper and breathe breath and life into them? Well, I say I want you to reignite your purpose. How many of you were excited when you first got in this business many years ago when you did? Raise your hand, please. How many of you were you ready? I mean, you know, you had jet fuel going. You know, you got up every day and you were excited about what you were doing. I want you to reignite your purpose. So let's play a little game. It's called the purpose game. How many of you have ever been to the Rocky Mountains? Raise your hand. Seen a picture of it, whatever. So let's pretend that you and I are going for a walk in the Rocky Mountains. And we're walking along and we notice that there's a ravine with a 1,000-foot drop straight down. And there's a guy on the other side waving his hand like crazy. He's got a paper bag with $500,000 in it. And he yells at you and says, hey, if you cross over the bridge, there's a wire and wicker bridge, 3 feet wide, 50 yards long, shacking back and forth. But if you cross over from one side to the next, he says, I'll give you the money. How many of you would cross over to get that $500,000? Raise your hand, please. Not bad. We got about 6 people on drugs, no problem. Most of you in the room said, I wouldn't go for any price. It's not enough what? Money to get me to risk my what? My life. Well, maybe the price isn't high enough for you just yet. So let's imagine somewhere out there, there's an ATM machine, he finds it. He emerges with $1 million, and he starts yelling, hey, you cross over the bridge, I'll give you the $1 million. But now it's 30 degrees with a 40-mile-an-hour wind blowing. But if you cross the bridge, you get the money. How many would cross the bridge to get the $1 million? Raise your hand. I guess some of those same people, I guess you say, honey, just show me the money, right? Most of you sitting there with your arms clenched high, they say, I'm not going for any price. It's not enough what? Say money to get me to risk my what? My life. Well, maybe the price isn't high enough for you just yet. Now I'd like you to do me a favor as you sit here this morning. I'd like you to imagine, or this afternoon, I'd like you to imagine the closest person in the world to you at this very moment. And you can only pick one person. Who would the person be? She says, you better pick me. But would it be a spouse? Would it be perhaps a child, a relative, a parent, a close friend? The closest person in the world to you right now. See their faces now. And imagine that he's holding them upside down by their feet. And he yells at you and says, if you don't come and get them right now, I will drop them. How many of you would cross the bridge to get that person you love? Raise your hand. And if you don't have your hand raised, I'm scared of you. Because you say, I ain't got nobody, man. Drop them, let them fall. But isn't it true that we'll do sometimes more things for other people than we'll do for ourselves? Say absolutely. Now, I did this experiment in San Francisco not long ago. A lady in the first row would not raise her hand. She was adamant about it. And she looked at me like, I'm not raising my hand for you or anybody else. So I step off the platform and I say, ma'am, you mean to tell me that you wouldn't cross that bridge to get your own children? She said, honey, it depends on which one. Well, my challenge to you this afternoon is this. How far are you willing to go to unlock the possibilities? To travel across that wire and wicker bridge of personal challenge and personal change to realize the best that's in you and everybody that you work with, because you are the energy. However, it's funny, I went to talk to a company a few weeks ago, and one of the managers, man, I need you to come here and just talk to me for a minute. I don't know what's wrong with these people. They just don't seem motivated. I said, well, why don't we start with you right now? Because the energy you're giving off is affecting your entire operation. It's funny, you know. So first rule, number one, reignite your purpose. Why are you doing what you want to do? How committed are you to bring in some new energy, to act differently and think differently? You've been challenged to become more competitive. Whatever energy you emit is the energy you're going to get back. The next thing is raise your standard of performance. What does that mean? Yes, everybody do me a favor. How many in the room think you can do more and go further than you've gone to this point? Raise your hand, please. I'm going to prove it to you right now that you can do that. Everybody in the room, stand up. You've been sitting for a while. Stand up, please. Stand up. Shake your body out. Shake it, shake it, shake it. Okay, everybody, clap your hands one time. Clap your hands 2 times. Clap your hands 3 times. Everybody do me a favor. Raise your right hand as high as you can get it. And when it's as high as you can get it, say absolutely. Do me a favor and stretch and raise your hand 2 inches high. Gotcha. You guys are so busted. Have a seat. Everywhere I go, it doesn't matter if it's a corporation, doesn't matter if it's a professional football team, have a seat. Everybody goes that extra 2 inches. When they said previously, that's as far as they could go. But isn't that true for all of us? I'm going to give you an example about raising the standards. How many people can tell me what the initials MJ stand for? Michael Jordan, right? I saw somebody say Michael Jackson, but Michael Jordan. Now, why is that? It's because, did he raise the standard in his chosen profession to something that we've never seen before? He did, didn't he? Absolutely. Now, picture this now. Michael Jordan was cut from the basketball team his sophomore year in high school, told he was not good enough. Laney High School, Wilmington, North Carolina, the coach says, you're not good enough. How'd you like to be that coach? Right? Cuts Michael Jordan. But he did the best thing he could have done for Michael, because here's what Michael said. He said, from that experience, I made a declaration to myself of this. He said, from that point on, I said, I'm going to demand more from myself than anyone else could ever expect. I thought, wow, I wrote it down because it works. He said, I'm going to say it again. I'll demand more from myself than anyone else could ever expect. What if we did that, right? Couldn't everybody go that extra 2 inches higher? Absolutely they could. Why is it so important to raise your standards? Why outside of this room, there's something called change that's happening all around. Right now, 5 drivers of change. There's more competition than ever before. Isn't that true? Say absolutely. Say it again, absolutely. 1, 2, 3, absolutely. Consumers have more choices now, don't they, than ever before. There's less durability of solutions. What does that mean? The things that used to work may not work anymore, and you have to be willing to change and keep the ball moving, keep it rolling. And the last thing, there's a greater need to uncover the hidden values in business called niches. This is my favorite part. Let's all say niches together. 1, 2, 3. I love that word. I'm sleeping one night. How many of you ever had a nightmare? Guy says, I'm having one right now. Well, I was having a nightmare. And I woke up, and the house was on fire, and there was a word emanating from my ceiling in my bedroom. It said, niches, niches, niches. I went and got a pad and paper. Oh, God, I found the key to success in the 21st century. It's niches. And I said, what is niches, you idiot? So I went and got American Heritage Dictionary. It said, niches, an ornamental recess in an object that's characterized by a crack or crevice. That didn't seem to do it for me, so I went and got another dictionary. Here's what it said. A vocation or activity for which one is best suited. That didn't seem to do it either, so I made up my own definition. You want to hear it? Say absolutely. Here it is, niches. Unserved market needs. Unserved guest needs. And if you don't believe in the power of niches, think about this. Right now outside of this room, more than 60% of the companies that made up the Fortune 500 30 years ago are no longer in business today because they got niched by somebody with a better idea. How about this one? How many of you in this room use goods and services from companies that have gone on to be #1 in their industries that did not exist 35 years ago? How many of you have ever FedExed anything? I had a chance to work with FedEx, a series of seminars, faster than the speed of light. They move. Think about this now. Fred Smith turns in a term paper. He's in college at Yale about how to revolutionize the way the mail is delivered, and the professor gave him a C. A C. you need to be more reasonable. No, idiot, whatever you use, pay that kind of money to lose the mail overnight. They just use regular mail. He said you need to be more reasonable to Fred Smith. Well, it's a good thing he didn't listen. $4 billion later, he went back on campus and he found that professor. You fill in the blanks of what he told him. Now, the question is, did Fred Smith really find anything new? No, not really. He worked in banking where he learned central warehousing. Southwest Airlines CEO Herb Keller was a good friend of his, point-to-point, and hub and spoke aircraft delivery. He took those two disciplines and he applied them to the mail, and he changed the way that we all work and live. Now, interestingly enough, the post office was already in the business, but they didn't ask the question, the pivotal question for success. Would you like to hear it? If you'd like to hear it, say absolutely. Here's the question. Every day, all day, every time you get in front of a guest, what I call moment of truth, you ask this question: how can we do it better? On the count of three, let's all say it together. 1, 2, 3. How can we do it better? How many of you have ever had a hamburger? Travel back in time with me, 1917. Model T Fords pulling up on dirt roads. Little cafe that's owned by Mr. and Mrs. Walt Anderson. They make the best meatball sandwich in the world. The lines is building up. No air conditioning. The fans are blowing. She's working the grill. He's working the cash register. Finally, there's an argument between the two of them. He says something she doesn't like. She takes one of the spatulas and she smashes one of the meatballs flat. And for the first time in America, a hamburger is served. They went on to found a chain of restaurants called White Castle. You ever heard of them? 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 seats to the wind. Can I get a witness? Oh, I'm the only one, right? Now picture this. 40 years later, what is the question? How can we do it what? Better. 40 years later, a restaurant supply salesman makes the last call of the day, almost doesn't make it, to a little dark, dinky, dingy restaurant in the base of the San Bernardino Mountains run by two brothers, Dick and Mac McDonald. The guy that made the call that day was 57 years old. His name is Ray Kroc. And he ran all the way back. He was so excited. He got that car and he drove back because that question was driving him. What is it? How can we do it better? Now, contrary to popular belief, how many of you believe you can make a better hamburger than McDonald's? Good, because if you can't cook, right? Right, but it's that simple. But that question drove him. You'll never see McDonald's make a commercial about how delicious their food is. They know that ain't true. But there's 2 C's that they sell. And they do it better than anybody. What are the C's? Consistency, and what else? Convenience. They know when you want it hot and you want it fast, the taste of the food is really secondary. What are you selling? What are you selling, choice? And do you deliver on that promise? And every time you get in front of a guest, every time you have a moment of truth, that question's got to drive you. What is it? How can we do it what? How can we do it better? Well, I looked at the clock on the wall in my dad's room and it said 6:50. Only 10 minutes had passed, but it seemed like much longer than that to me. They're going to try to get him to eat for the first time in 7 months. So they wheel in his breakfast: scrambled eggs, Special K, orange juice, toast. We started talking, but this conversation was different. Different than any conversation we ever had before, because he never had much time before except for this morning. That was a question I've been wanting to ask my dad my whole life, and I never had the courage to ask it until that moment. I said, Dad, are you proud of me? He said, proud of you? Oh, I couldn't be proud of anybody than you. Don't you know that? I said, Dad, you never told me. You told other people, but you never told me. I jumped through rings of fire to hear him say that, but people didn't talk like that back in those days. There was something he'd been wanting to say to me. I've been waiting to hear it my whole life, but men just didn't say it of his generation. When he told me, he said, I love you. Love you, son. Always have, always will. Oh, I jumped through rings of fire to hear him say that too. 3 hours passed, and he looked up at the clock and he says, I think I'm hungry. Yes. Right before they wheel in his lunch, Dr. Bennett walks into the room. He's a man with a mission. He doesn't ask me. He orders me, sit down on the bed next to your dad. God like ordering me around. So I did that. I sit on the bed next to my dad. He sits on the bed like I'm doing now, and he grabs my dad's hands. And he said, how you doing, old buddy? He said, well, it's been a long road the last 7 months. And he said, he said, I'm so embarrassed. There were times I gave up on you. I told your son to come home that you were going to die, but every time I thought about losing you, there was a twinkle in your eye. Words of encouragement that you would give to let me know, don't you give up on me, because I'm not giving up. He said, I'm so ashamed. As I sit here, tears welling down his face. I'm the doctor. I'm supposed to be encouraging you, he says. He says, from now on I will never, ever give up on another patient as long as I live. They're all going to make it until God tells me otherwise. He gets up and he walks out. When he crosses the threshold, I say to myself, there goes Dr. Kenneth Bennett. He's got a PhD in medicine. Here's my dad, never went to high school, 8th grade education. And in that moment I thought, is it possible for a guy with an 8th grade education to teach something to a guy with a PhD? And the answer is what? Absolutely. 1, 2, 3, say it. Absolutely. Well, I had a speech to give much like this one. I told my dad, I'm not going. We don't know how much time we have left. I want to stay here with you. Here's what he did. He took that hospital bed in the house and he pushes it to a 45-degree angle, looks at me and says, if you've ever heard the cancerous whisper of someone going down the final road, he says, look at me. I says, I'm looking. He says, look at me. He says, look at me. I'm looking. He says, let me tell you something about life. We live and we die. But in between that, we fight. You got to fight for your right to be the best you can be. Why? Because you're here. So you go tell that audience of people that your dad said that. Well, he died just a few hours later. Never once did he ask, why me? Never once a complaint. Always that twinkle in his eye and that smile. And I got it as memorial. His memorial, I got it when all these people came around from the vendors that served us, the food companies and the milk companies and Seagram's and Anheuser-Busch, all these people. I said, he wasn't in the restaurant business. He was in the people business. And that's how he gave his message, was through his business. So you with me? You're not in the hotel business. You're in the what business? You're in the people business. And the minute we get out of that hotel business or whatever finite business and get into the people business, then we will see the results of that soar. Fight for your right to be the best. Well, I needed to hear that, because who could ever known that just 3 short years later I would fall off of a ladder and I would break my neck. I'm laying in the hospital for more than 3 months and I'm paralyzed. I need 14 hours of surgery to repair my neck. And this became my new home. This was my mainstay. In this halo, I had to learn to unlock the possibilities because I couldn't move. This was my house. This is the most difficult thing I ever had to do in my entire life. And I was depressed. And I thought, a motivational speaker that's depressed, that really works well. Well, I went to Dr. Haynes, Stephen Haynes, my neurologist, after about the first 2 months in this thing. I said, look, man, you got to take this off because I'm like going crazy. He says, I'm not taking it off, so deal with it. He said, listen, close the door. He put everybody out. I had guests that day. He said, let me tell you something about this thing. He said, I got people that are patients of mine that could walk, but they will never walk again because they won't push themselves to go through the painstaking process of rehabilitation, so they'll never know. And they lay there and accept that reality. I got people that can lift their arms, but they'll never lift them again because they won't push themselves. But isn't that kind of true of life? People don't achieve success because they want to stay with the status quo. They don't want to do the work, the rehabilitation. It's true in business too. I said, Doc, do you have anybody that drives with this on? He said, don't even think about it. I went home and got my car that day. Man, you haven't lived till you pull up to a red light wearing this bad boy. But I thought about his message. Those words, fight for your right to be the best. Well, I do work with the NFL, and it's always funny to work with the young men, and they all play cards all the time, on the plane and stuff. So you guys play cards. You don't even know what the cards mean. They say, what do you mean? So I went and did a little homework. I said, now what cards are usually at the top of most decks? Not all the time, but in most cases, what cards are at the top? Jokers or what? Aces. Aces. Right. So I went and got the aces. And I said, oh my goodness, the first one, it was the ace of spade. It's called the death card. But it doesn't mean the death of a person. It means the death of old ideas. It means a new beginning. Have you heard the presentations that were given here this afternoon? Everybody came with hope and possibilities, what? Of a what? Of a new beginning. That's the ace of spades. The next card is the ace of diamonds. It stands for unity and togetherness. Look around the room. Many of you have been in this business for years. A lot of people are your friends. When you get back, you want what? A unified organization, do you not? When you get married, you get a diamond ring to demonstrate what? And illustrate the unity of the relationship. The next card, the Ace of Clubs. It means growth and significance. How much do you want to grow? Move from success to significance. That's a big leap, but it's one that I think you're willing to make. Are you not? Say absolutely. The last card is the Ace of Hearts. It means moments of the heart, home, family. That's what your guests are really looking for, right? To be wanted, needed, and above all, respected. So with that, I leave you with a poem. It's called Faith. It says, doubt sees the obstacles, but faith sees the way. Doubt sees the darkest night, but faith sees the day. Doubt dreads to take one step, but faith just soars on high. Doubt asks the question, who believes? Faith answers, I. You have everything inside of you that it takes to be a winner, but most of all, you've got a choice-winning spirit. And when you leave this room in this convention, I want you to unleash that spirit and let it explode. Thank you very much. God bless you all, and I wish you the best of success. Thank you. Thank you.